Dr. Maria Angela Simao, Assistant Director General of the World Health Organization, and Mr. Edward Kwakwa, Assistant Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization. Thank you for being here today and for joining Dr. Ngozi and me in this important discussion. Our session today will also feature a short video message by Rebecca Greenspan, Secretary General of UNCTAD. And we will also hear remarks from a representative from Ms. Marion Jensen of the OECD and Mr. John Brandolino of UNODC online. So we have a large audience online from across the world, and thank you for joining us, as well as thank you to all of you who are here in the room. And with this, let's get started with our discussion. And let me turn over to you, Dr. Ngozi. We know that today the WTO is launching a publication on illicit trade in medical products. Can you tell us about your own experience with illicit trade? Since you arrived, you've asked us here at the WTO to pay greater attention to this issue of illicit trade. And why is that? And I would also like to ask you to please refer to the main messages in our report. So Dr. Ngozi, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Annabelle, for moderating this. And I want to say thank you to our colleagues, both those who are online and joining us here physically for the panel. I'm really delighted to see Maria Angela again, and to Kunio, thank you for flying in from Ghana this morning, and Gerd coming a shorter distance from Vienna, but nevertheless taking time out of your busy schedule, and Edward from next door to us. And then we have other leaders online who are going to join us. So thank you. I also want to say a big thank you to the WTO team led by Suja and all the inter divisional cooperation that went into doing this, because as you said, Annabelle, I thought this was an important area for us to delve into. And I think that having seen what illicit trade in medical drugs and illicit drugs themselves can do in terms of human lives. During my time in my country as a minister, we had a very famous colleague of mine, Professor Dora Akunyili, who won numerous awards. She was the head of Food and Drug Administration, the equivalent NAFDAC, and she really had a sister of hers suffer from this and went after this. That's how we discovered that this is a huge problem and a huge area. Illicit trade in drugs, illicit drugs coming from different parts of the world, even being manufactured in country, were really leading to loss of lives, as many poor people, self-medicate. And when you sell these kinds of drugs or even illicit vaccines, and so it can lead to death. So just looking at that issue when we had the pandemic, thinking about what might be going on with illicit drugs during this time and diagnostic equipment that may give you the wrong result. This is what really bothered me. And I thought that we are the WTO working on trade. We ought to really look at this issue and have a view. So I'm very excited to see this publication and to be able to collaborate with colleagues who are also looking into the same issues. I do hope that what we're doing today will advance our collaboration with the World Customs Organization, UNIDO, WIPO, UNODC, and others who are working on this area. So as I said, time and again, we see illicit trade threatening people's health and livelihoods, but also undermining legitimate business activity. It abets corruption. I mean, to do some of this, you need sometimes to see the collaboration between perhaps undermining customs procedures and customs agents who help to bring some of these products in. So the fact that it leads to corruption, loss of lives, these are two areas, two things which I think really we ought to be cognizant of and look at. And that's why I think this study is also important. I also become convinced that working together as an international community, we can seize opportunities to fight this kind of illicit activity, whilst at the same time strengthening uh, um, strengthening strengthening illicit trade, especially in poor countries that have poor capacity. You know, fighting to block illicit trade also means building capacity to do licit trade. So I see the two things are not necessarily against each other, but really work together, helping developing countries and least developed work on trade facilitation issues, on reducing bureaucracy with respect to customs, on regulatory frameworks and standards. I think these are all the things that can be very, very helpful. I think also looking at gaps in our knowledge and data on this area is very important, and very, it's key that we collaborate on this. So let me talk about a couple of, you said that I should highlight main messages. I've alluded to them, but let me speak to them more closely. I think there are two main messages that I would like to pull out from the report. The first, the WTO rulebook is an important ally in the fight against illicit trade. We've identified several areas where existing WTO rules can support members in addressing illicit trade in medical products. Illicit traders in medical products take advantage of complex, non-transparent customs rules, like I said before, to ply illegal goods and activities. Full implementation of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, for example, to improve risk management systems, pre and post clearance processes. This can enhance border controls needed to tackle illicit trade. WTO rules can also help members strengthen product regulations to improve conformity of medical products with quality, health, and safety standards, and to promote balanced intellectual property rights enforcement to keep counterfeit medical products away from markets. And I'm looking now at Edward. So that's the first thing, that we do have a body of rules and that can help, and agreements that can help do this. We don't have to start from scratch. I think second, whilst it is great to have access to existing tools, the high cost of inaction means we need to do more. And that's why the report also looks at the benefits of deepening national, regional, and international cooperation. For the poorest and most vulnerable countries, fighting illicit trade can deliver a double dividend, as I mentioned at the beginning, strengthen their capacity to fight illicit trade whilst expanding legitimate trading opportunities and building resilience against future shocks to the multilateral trading system. And of course, aid for trade, or what I'm now going to be calling investment for trade, can help them seize that double dividend. So I think those are two clear messages. We need to cooperate at all levels together to get this done. We need to support poor countries, and we already have existing tools with which to fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ngozi. And we will come a bit later to discuss a bit more the topic of cooperation among our institutions. Let me turn now to Dr. Maria Angela Simao. The World Health Organization plays a key role in preventing substandard, unregulated, and falsified medicines from coming to markets. So Maria Angela, can you share with us how does the WHO assist its members in combating illicit trade in medical products, please?
Thank you very much, Annabelle, and thank you for the invite to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Ngozi and you and the colleagues. And also let me say, I'm very impressed with the report. It's easy to read, and it's a very friendly format. Congratulations, very good. We need more of this type of, I always say that policymakers don't have time to read like 50 pages document. So this is, it's a good thing. So WHO has two main areas of interest, and I'll speak very quickly about only illicit trade. One is what you're mentioning, which is the substandard and falsified medical products. And the other is something that we are dealing more and more, which is the organ trafficking and transplantation. So these two areas are areas of interest for WHO. And on the substandard and falsified medicines, WHO has a member state mechanism that was established in 2012, and that meets regularly. It's a governing body mechanism, and it works super well. Because we need to have member states engaged very much on this discussion, because the commerce of substandard and falsified medicines and medical products in general, it's big business, right? And it flourishes where there's no public policy to ensure access to these products. But it also, what we've seen in the past years is the growth of the e-commerce, right? So this changed the context of our discussions with member states, in the sense that before it was a problem that we saw more in developing countries. And then it became a global problem. Then it's much easier to tackle when it becomes global, right? Because WHO estimates that 1 in 10 medical products that are being used in low and middle income countries are either substandard or falsified. And they can be found in lower income countries in illegal street markets or access through the websites. They go to pharmacies, to clinics and hospitals. And we see a lot of like antibiotics, and we see antimalarial in previous years. And WHO, we have a global surveillance system, and we issue medical alerts, right? And last year, it's 90 medical alerts since it was established, when we tell because we see it's going into more than one country. And last year, out of 11 global medical alerts, 5 were for COVID products. So the market adjusts itself to the needs, the perceived needs, right? I think sometimes terminology matters, and I would say that for WHO, it's the differentiation from the use of counterfeit language and substandard and falsified is very important. This was a member state decision, because substandard are basically products that don't fit the specifications of the regulatory authority, the health regulatory authority. While falsified are falsified. They pretend to be something that they are not, right? And counterfeit was used there was maybe 10 years ago, and especially when HIV was a huge problem, it was used very much to conflate legal generics with falsified products. So that was the time when the WHO member state mechanisms pushed towards using the substandard and falsified language and not the counterfeit. And we do have a world where about 2 billion people don't access the basics for medicines and medical products. And it's a problem. And like I mentioned, also the growth of the e-commerce is the other problem, right? So we see it, and we are very happy to see that you are working, there is a growing work on the regulations for the e-commerce, because this is outside WHO's mandate. There's not much. There are two, we do need to strengthen the country's capacities, and I appreciate, Dr. Ngozi, when you're talking about corruption, because one of the things that the WHO works very strongly with member states is the establishment of transparent procurement of medical products at country level, or ideally for countries with less capacity to have pooled procurement. I think this is a good way forward. So we need stronger national health regulatory authorities. We have an entire activities going on this area, but we need to strengthen multi-sectoral collaboration, because there are areas in our strategy like comprehensive legal frameworks, transparent legal process, border control, that are core functions from WTO, WCO, others, right? And we're working very closely with UNODC, because UNODC has a guide to combat crime related to substandard and falsified, so we're working together. On the second issue, let me go very quickly through it. Apologies for taking too long. But on organ trafficking, what we are seeing first is that you all know there's an increase, an aging population, an increase on what we call the chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes. And this, at the end stage of the disease, if it's not taken care of, and many people, it's transplantation. And there's a very weak network of at country levels of in general, the low availability of transplant services and shortage of organ donors. So we are talking about a highly lucrative organized crime, corruption in the health system and the health providers. So this is very, very serious because it's a growing need, and WHO has issued a series of guidance and principles to guide the organization of the transplantation system. And we do have an ongoing, there is a resolution on the UN General Assembly on organ trafficking. We were working very closely with ODC, with the Office of the High Commissioner, and to make sure that this is taken ahead. But we also think that WTO and WCO, you play a major role, you know, and I think we need to increase our collaboration with your two institutions on the border control and the practices that make this illicit trade, criminal trade, very profitable. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comments, Maria Angela. It's definitely, I think, I see a key priority for WHO. I'm glad to hear that. Let me turn over now to Dr. Gerd Müller. So illicit traders often exploit weaknesses in national regulatory systems to sell medical and other products that can be substandard or unsafe, as we just heard from Maria Angela. So what are the challenges, risks, and opportunities the industry faces on illicit trade in medical products? And how can UNIDO contribute to achieve a more accessible, safe, and secure medicine for all?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ngozi, Excellencies. What is the most important question beside food every day? That is health. Yeah. And illegal medical products are a multi-billion-dollar global market. Congratulations, all figures are with this very interesting publication. It's really great. The circulation of low quality and unsafe medical products affects the poorest the most. That is really the problem. This is criminal and demands hard sanctions and punishment. Producers must be liable, and international structures must be upheld by a global health policing force to prevent and prosecute such criminality. That is criminality. And the pharma industry, the international pharma industry, must take on responsibility more than now. So the best answer in access is access for all to legal medical products. And let me say, even to contraceptions. That is a very important question in developing countries. And that means take on responsibility in local production in medical products. And we thank Ms. Ngozi, and thank you for the TRIPS waiver for COVID vaccines. That was so important because the COVID pandemic has further divided the world into poor and rich. Vaccines and medical products were too long only available for industrialized countries. And that is unacceptable in an interconnected world. The consequences for the future must be the following 7 points short. First, developing countries must be equal partners in international pharmaceutical markets. Second, medications and vaccines are global public goods, not for private industry or certain countries. Third, patient protections should not hinder worldwide production. Fourth, research must be more transparent worldwide. And fifth, the production of life-saving vaccines and medications must be a worldwide system. The same with distribution. Distribution is also a very, very open and difficult question. Six, the great work of the WHO must be strengthened as the global health organization. And seventh, I will mention COVAX, Gavi, the Global Fund, and many international and UN organizations as key partners. And UNIDO has a long-standing experience in providing technical cooperation and advisory services to advance local pharmaceutical production in developing countries. And for example, last year, only one example, in responding to member states' requests, we launched the Global UNIDO Health Industry Initiatives. The initiative promotes local manufacturing and health products like vaccines, essential medicines. And we will implement this jointly with our UN partners organization and WTO. And now let me make a general observation. We need a new global ethics. Health is a human right for everybody in the world, and every person has the right to health. Millions of people are dying right now of treatable illnesses. In refugee camps, for example, I visited a lot of them, basic medicines. And that is really a scandal. Naturally, poverty means no access to medicines and vaccines. The poor suffer most. In this case, the market does not work. Consider, for example, neglected tropical disease. You know about this, NTDs like dengue fever or sleeping sickness. Tens, hundreds of millions of people suffer from such illnesses each year. We do have medication about this, but these people do not have access, and many of them can be helped. But a world with affordable, safe, and quality medicines for all, that is possible. So I'm optimist. It is possible. We need to act again, even in this field. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the opportunities, and we have the money. What is missing? What is missing? The will, the political will of the leaders in the world, of the industry, the pharmaceutical industry in the world. I must be so clear. So we need, and that is a pleasure, we need a strong coalition of international organizations. And I thank you, Dr. Nigosi, for these initiatives. UNIDO, I look forward to cooperate with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gerd, for those words, and in particular for your interest in strengthening collaboration with all of these organizations. Let me now move to Dr. Kunio Mikurija. Customs agencies are a key partner in the fight against illicit trade in medical products, while also playing a key role in keeping legal trade of medical products moving. So I know this is a topic that WCO attaches great importance, and I would like to ask you to share with us how is it that WCO is helping national customs agencies fulfill this dual role?
Well, thank you, Annabelle, for invitation. And as you said, customs is playing a role of facilitating legitimate trade, but at the same time, we are the first defense line to fight against illicit trade, which poses health, safety, and security risk. And how we can deal with that? WCO provides instruments, standards, guidelines, or other tools And already was talked about risk management. We have huge work on risk management, how to ensure to identify small percentage of high risk goods and other low risk goods. We just try to facilitate. So this is risk management, and also we provide more technical support to our members so that they can share information. Because I talked about risk management, but it is based on data. And data is provided by commercial data, because all commercial data comes to cross-border, comes to customs, but also from other agencies and open source data that we combine them to do our risk management work. And we connect all the customer administrations with our IT system so that we can share immediately information related to illicit trade. And using that infrastructure, we often organize global operations to raise awareness and also train customs officers how to implement risk management and how to work with other government agencies, because we need cooperation. Customs is on the ground, but we implement not only custom regulations, but all national regulations related to export import. We are in charge of implementing. So health or other standards and all other ones that we implement. And then another importance is, of course, capacity building of our members. And not only technical issues, but organizational area is important. Already was talked about corruption in customs. And yes, we have a problem, but when customs is corrupt, it's not only customs, other agencies. Already WHO mentioned about health authorities and business who corrupt customs. So it takes two to tango. So how we can address that issue is a very important one. Well, more concretely, for example, COVID-19 crisis has happened. Immediately, we worked with the WHO, try to identify what are the medicines and medical supplies and later vaccines that are really essential goods that we have to facilitate. And based on our standards, customs and business really facilitated that one. And also we worked with other essentially transport sectors that to develop guidance, how you can transport those goods along the logistic lines in safety. And also we talk to private sector. We constantly consult with the private sector. And what are your problems? What are the bottlenecks? And what we identified is the lack of coordination on the ground, at the borders. So immediately we contacted with relevant transport trade organizations, including WTO, of course, and issued joint statement, joint letters to facilitate the on-the-ground cooperation between customs and relevant ministries and, of course, including trade. So that is what we did. And also, we anticipated that perhaps this is the opportunity that organized crime will exploit. And so we talked, we use our tools to really train customs officers for that part. And COVID-19, so we couldn't send our staff. So we organized almost 100 webinars around the world, and more than 5,000 customs officers were trained that how to identify genuine vaccines, how to identify the transport means, and what are the specifics of falsified or substandard vaccines, and of course medicines as well. And this has resulted in huge seizures. Millions of falsified or substandard or regulated medicines, medical supplies, vaccines were intercepted. And then what we did was that we analyzed those seizure data and try to identify what are the risk indicators and bring back to customs administrations so that they reinforce that risk management. And in the end, we try to really identify what are the problems. One is e-commerce, you have mentioned, and thank you very much for taking up in this brochure. And with those seizure records, we try to raise awareness of the society that should come to support customs function at borders. So essentially, those are the areas that we are trying to support customs administration, but through customs administration with other agencies and national health and safety.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cunyo. It's clear that Customs is the first line of defense in this area. Let me turn now to Mr. Edward Kwakwa. WIPO plays an active role in assisting its members, basically to strengthen their capacity to enforce intellectual property rights, including as a means to fight counterfeit medical products. How can intellectual property enforcement be effectively used to that extent?
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. Dr. Ngozi, thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be with such distinguished heads of organizations. Let me start, before I get into trouble, by extending the warm greetings of my boss, the Director General of WIPO, Darren Tang. He wishes he could have been here with us, but unfortunately was caught up with other matters. So he sends his special regards. Now, Annabelle, as relating to your question, I should like to start by drawing your attention to what we call Development Agenda Recommendation 45. In WIPO, as far back as 2007, our 193 member states adopted what we now call the WIPO Development Agenda. And that development agenda specifically instructs us as an organization to, and I'm quoting, approach intellectual property enforcement in the context of broader societal interests and especially development-oriented concerns, end quote. So as a result of this development agenda, we in the Secretariat have always strived to ensure a balanced intellectual property enforcement. That's one thing. And in that context, I should also like to refer to, we have a standing committee of our member states that we call the Advisory Committee on Enforcement, popularly called ACE. That ACE has a mandate that includes technical assistance and coordination in the field of intellectual property enforcement. So it serves as a platform essentially where all our WIPO member states, as well as representatives from public and private entities, are able to share their experiences and best practices. And in this context, let me also recall that this ACE will have its next session. This is the 15th session of the ACE next month from August 31 to September 2nd. So I'm hoping most of you will actually participate in that meeting. Let me continue to highlight what I would say is the fact that WIPO carries out capacity building activities across all the regions of the world. These are activities designed in close cooperation with our member states, so they are tailored specifically to the needs of those member states. And normally the target audience we have would be judges, prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and customs officials. And that is why we pay particular attention to enforcement when it comes to illicit drugs. I should also like to report on the legislative assistance that WIPO provides. And this is legislative assistance provided on a confidential basis. So we are hoping and we do believe that this confidential assistance helps our member states to assess the compatibility of their current as well as their proposed legislation with enforcement-related obligations under Dr. Ngozi's TRIPS agreement, part 3 specifically. Now, let me also, and I'm not just rattling down a series of things we do in WIPO in the area of enforcement, but Annabelle, I'm trying to respond specifically to your question. And I should say we have produced materials on IP enforcement, including what we call a case book on the enforcement of IP rights. This is a series that addresses the infringement of IP rights, civil remedies, and criminal enforcement. And more importantly, serves as a training tool for members of the judiciary, for law enforcement officials, for attorneys, and for rights holders. Very important part for rights holders. WIPO has also developed what we call, again, investigating and prosecuting IP crime training materials. These are training materials, again, for law enforcement authorities and prosecutors. And we are working with our member states who want to adapt and customize these training materials to their own legal framework so as to make them even more useful and effective. And in this context, I can already confirm that WIPO has recently customized 2 such training materials, one for ASEAN member states, the other one for Albania. Albania is just one of our 193 member states, but what we do is we respond to countries on a specific request basis. And that is how come we have done one for Albania in particular. Annabelle, let me stress finally that WIPO definitely understands the importance of detecting infringing medical products and the impact that effective use of technologies could have in this context. So what we've done in WIPO is we have actually established a WIPO blockchain task force. And as part of the mandate of this blockchain task force, it's drafting a new WIPO standard that will specifically support the potential application of blockchain technologies within intellectual property ecosystems. It's basically trying to address challenges that include interoperability, governance, and regulation. And we see this as relevant from an enforcement perspective because blockchain technology, like most other modern types of digital tools, will definitely be able to contribute to secure the chain of distribution and to ensure the genuine character of the products distributed. So in short, we do believe in WIPO that enforcement of IP legislation can serve as a tool to address illicit trade in medical products. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edward, to you and to all of our panel members for giving us such a clear and insightful perspectives on what your organizations are doing to fight trade in illicit products. Before we continue with another round of questions, let us hear now a short video message from the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Rebecca Greenspan, please.
Your Excellency, dear friend Ngozi, Director General of the World Trade Organization, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. As the 2030 Agenda wisely says, good health is the keystone to every development issue. Illicit trade in medical products endangers our development by endangering our health. Even prior to the pandemic, the size of illicit trade was estimated at around $200 billion annually. And this in pharmaceuticals alone. It is often the poorest and most vulnerable who are tricked by these substandard products, while criminals take advantage of patchy trade frameworks and bad governance. Interpol reports that falsified medical products may hold market shares of up to 30% in some countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In the EU, counterfeit medicines may reduce government revenues by close to 2 billion euros. Expenditures on ineffective medicines are waste. Every use of a substandard medical product represents a worsened healthcare outcome, where existing conditions may deteriorate, adverse reactions may be experienced, and drug-resistant infections may begin to thrive. Estimates show that as many as 170,000 children may die from pneumonia every year because of counterfeit drugs. If we are to build resilience against future pandemics, combating illicit trade in medical products is absolutely essential. You can count on us at UNCTAD as allies in this important mission. UNCTAD will host the Illicit Trade Forum on the 6th and 7th of September. You are all invited to come. I hope you will be with us. I want to finish by thanking the WTO, our sister institution, in promoting these important discussions.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that message. And I would now like to turn to two additional actors with a long history in supporting efforts to combat illicit trade in medical products and beyond. First, let me give the floor to Mr. John Brandolino, Director at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. John is online now, and John, can you please come in?
Yes, hello. I'm trying to get my video going and somehow I cannot, but thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm sorry if the video doesn't seem to be working, but I'll give my remarks. I want to start by just reinforcing the comment made by Mariangela, WHO, about the importance of terminology related to this area. We at UNODC focus on the term of falsified medical products, because that is the part that deals with intent and obviously with criminal aspects of this heinous crime, heinous activities. So I will talk a little bit about what we're doing in that area. And the COVID pandemic has really revealed more clearly than ever that most states are really not prepared to address the manufacture and trafficking of falsified medical products, particularly from a law enforcement point of view. And we believe that states can enhance their capabilities by the following means. First, countries could benefit by reviewing and strengthening their legal regulatory frameworks to combat the trafficking of falsified medical products, to ensure that these offenses can be addressed as organized and serious crime pursuant to the UN Organized Crime Convention. And by doing that, it unlocks the aspects of the convention that allow member states to use the full measures of information collection, sharing, use of all investigation and prosecution powers, and including the seizing and confiscation of proceeds of such crimes. And UNODC, with the support of WHO, Interpol, and others, developed in 2019 a legislative guide to combating falsified medical product-related crime that can be used to review and strengthen legal frameworks. And under the framework of our West African network of central authorities and prosecutors, we've also established a working group on falsified medical products to raise awareness among prosecuting and judicial authorities in general, and of the need to address some gaps in the legal frameworks. Secondly, the manufacture and trafficking of falsified medical products are difficult to detect and to investigate. and therefore states should enhance the collaboration and coordination between regulatory and law enforcement authorities, but also with the private sector. The need for collaboration among a number of parts of our governments and sectors has been mentioned by a number of the speakers. Regulatory authorities and law enforcement entities must begin to work more closely to better understand each other's role and how they can mutually support the collection and sharing of data to understand the scope of the problem, the methods, the roots of illicit trafficking, as well as the harm caused by such products. Data collection is also needs to be more robust and institutionalized and supported by good research and analysis. UNODC, the WCO, Interpol, and WHO have established an informal coordination mechanism resulting in regular information sharing and coordination on this issue. And this includes sharing both regulatory and law enforcement authorities, how they are participating in these activities and training. We have training and support activities for such operations. Cooperation with the private sector is key, as has been mentioned in all these efforts. In collaboration with Interpol and WHO, we're finalizing a training guide for law enforcement officials in detecting and investigating falsified medical product crime that we hope will ensure a more common approach to capacity building and will also push law enforcement authorities to cooperate more with not only regulatory authorities, but the private sector. And through our container control program implemented with WCO, we provide risk assessment training to customs officials, as was just mentioned, that also aims to address trafficking in falsified medical products. And that has led to a number of significant seizures of falsified medical products. And finally, given the detrimental impact that the manufacturer has on health and on economy, states should begin taking a more strategic and holistic approach to address needs of those agencies responsible for addressing it as a crime and a health problem. Thank you for the opportunity for UNODC to share its views during this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, for sharing your views with us. Let me now turn to Ms. Marion Jensen, Director of the Trade and Agricultural Directorate at OECD, to ask her for her take on what has been said and how can OECD continue to contribute to these efforts.
Many thanks for giving me the floor, and also thanks for inviting the OECD to intervene in this important session. Please accept the regrets of my Secretary General, Matthias Cormann, who could unfortunately not be in Geneva today. I would like to make 3 comments after having heard what I heard today. One, I would like to thank Dr. Ngozi for once again driving change. Second, I would like to say a few words on what the OECD does in the area of illicit trade in terms of analysis, but also the development of legal instruments. And third, I would like to thank Mr. Gerd Müller for his reference to the importance of access to contraception. Thanks to Dr. Ngozi for driving change, because I remember very well when I started my career in this agency at some stage, like over 20 years ago, I was asked, what is the WTO doing on illicit trade? And I was very proud to answer, we are not doing anything on this topic. And I was proud because I thought, oh, certainly illicit trade is something illegal that we do not want to be dealing with. Well, that was naive, not to say use a harsher word. We have just heard how important illicit trade in pharmaceuticals is and the damage this can bring. So thank you, Dr. Ngozi, for having the WTO work on illicit trade and for also driving change at the OECD. Because like at the WTO, my directorate doesn't deal with illicit trade. Another directorate does, the governance directorate. And to prepare the speech here, we had to work together. That's an important change. So now I'm going to tell you what that other directorate has been doing on illicit trade. A lot of analysis bringing forward data of the type that we have been hearing here today, the importance of illicit trade in pharmaceuticals, the different types of pharmaceutical products that are affected, ranging from antibiotics, via HIV medication, but also cancer medication. So very important topics. And then the big area of, for instance, transport roads that are being used for illicit trade, making the work of the World Customs Organization more difficult. Very important, though, that we recently at the OECD in 2019, our members endorsed a recommendation on countering illicit trade with a specification enhancing transparency in free trade zones. So the focus of that recommendation is on free trade zones. The recommendation is not specific to pharmaceuticals, it's more general, but the recommendation is relevant because free trade zones also, illicit trade in pharmaceuticals also takes trade through free trade zones. And you will find in that recommendation references to the kinds of aspects that you have been mentioning here, the importance of relevant authorities. I'm thinking in this case, for instance, of health authorities to have access to information of what happens in free trade zones and the right to request information and data and hence to contribute to more transparency. We also at the OECD, and that's in my directorate, work on trade facilitation. We develop one of the indicators, trade facilitation indicator, that helps to trace whether members are making it easier to trade, and that includes in aspects like regulatory collaboration, therefore something that makes legal trade also in pharmaceuticals easier. Let me conclude. I'm becoming very personal now by thanking Herr Gerd Müller for his reference to contraception as a woman and as a mother of 2 daughters. I feel unfortunately that even in Europe, I cannot feel sure anymore that my daughters will continue to have access to contraception, and therefore count on us at the OECD, count on me personally to work with you on this matter, and to all of you on the panel. We look forward at the OECD to work with you on tackling illicit trade in medical products. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marion, for sharing what is it that OECD is doing in this area, and for your comments more broadly. Let me just turn back to our panel and ask you for a quick response on priority areas for international cooperation to fight illicit trade in medical products, and how can we join together these organizations that are sitting here, but with other stakeholders as well. I'm going to start in reverse order. Edward, can I come to you, please?
Thank you, Annabelle. Yes, let me start by saying, as an African, I have seen firsthand how unregulated medicines affect people. And of course, we all know the culture of self-medication renders people vulnerable to illicit drugs. So this is a very important subject, not just to my organization, but also to me personally. And I'd like to, one, stress the importance of enhanced cooperation to create a more united response and to avoid reinventing the wheel. Just to give an example, and you are probably at this stage tired of hearing me talk about what WIPO has done, but I wanted to say between 2011 and 2019, we've organized in WIPO a roundtable on technical assistance, substandard, falsified, and counterfeit medicines. And that served as a means of exploring areas of synergy between the organizations and areas of cooperation between participation IGOs. So that's the first example. The second one, I would like to suggest we could propose the creation of a more permanent forum to discuss illicit medical products. The forum could be hosted by WTO or by any of the organizations participating here. And in that context, in line with the next steps proposed by WTO in this publication, I would suggest such a forum could serve for information exchange, coordination of awareness raising, training and technical assistance activities, and policy coordination among the relevant IGOs, all to ensure a coordinated and multilateral response to illicit trade in medical products. Thirdly, let me suggest we could develop a common strategy, and here I'm talking again about the IGOs, for countering the trade in illicit medical products. This could be an interorganizational group working to create and prepare a specific strategy to tackle this huge problem. And let me simply end by expressing again that heightened cooperation in trainings, heightened cooperation in sharing of materials among the relevant organizations would serve as well. So finally, what we need to harp on is the need to cooperate on awareness raising activities to increase the visibility of the cause. Thank you.
Great recommendations. Thank you very much, Edward. Let me now come to you, Dr. Mikurija, and ask you for your views on this.
Well, thank you. Each international organization has its own mandate and, constituencies and expertise. Therefore, it is important to respect each other's mandate and while leveraging those mandates. Already not avoiding inventing the wheel was mentioned, but that is important. It is not about one individual organization winning, but coming together for the common goal is important. And from customs point of view, we are implementing all the national regulations. And quite often what we see is the lack of legal framework. If in all areas, if the regulation lacks clarity, we have difficulties in implementation. And secondly, it's more of a cooperation between, I'm talking at a national level, that cooperation between other government agencies and business quite often lacking. And international organization has, each one has its constituencies. So why not supporting those national efforts for coordination? And thirdly, awareness raising. And I appreciate this booklet, but that kind of awareness raising will go into the national prioritization, and that will affect the resource allocation. So this is what we can do together in that direction. And for the tools, for example, OECD has mentioned about free trade zone and recommendations, and we developed based, we looked into the recommendations, and we already developed guidance how to keep transparency of free trade zone. So that kind of regulatory cooperation is also very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mikurija. I believe Dr. Mueller gave us a very strong statement in the beginning encompassing this question. So I'm going to come to you, Mariangela, now to hear your thoughts on priorities for cooperation, please.
Thank you very much. And it's very good to hear across the organizations on this panel, the centrality of affordable access to safe and efficacious medical products, right? And we've seen during this pandemic the huge problem we'd have, I would add, timely, affordable access to this medication. This is important in the context of IP protection and everything else, right? So this is just the umbrella, but I would say very, very pragmatically, we could do better on the e-commerce. You know, I think that it's and especially I would say we've been trying very hard to work with the public, general public, and with health services. Don't buy if it's not registered in the country. Don't buy if you see. But there's a lot of the e-commerce that depends on individuals buying. Right? So I think this is an area that does require that the multilateral organizations do work better, and it's very much outside WHO's mandate. But we are very happy to, because this has an impact on our work, right? And the second is the support for strengthening countries' capacity for procurement, either at a country level or a pool procurement mechanism. And we're talking about transparent mechanisms, and we've been working on this with the ONODC on the corruption, but we do need to have a probably more systematic approach across different multilateral organizations to support countries. When WIPO is supporting countries and training countries on IP enforcement, that this goes together with building capacity to buy products. You know, then this is I think this is then you by doing that, you may increase access to safe and efficacious medical products. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria Angela, for your thoughts and recommendations as well. Clearly, I think the magnitude of the challenge is big, and we have heard about it. But I think that all of these organizations have also shown that this is a key priority and that they see further opportunities to come and work together. Before we adjourn, I want to ask Dr. Ngozi to come in again and offer some concluding thoughts on the question of international cooperation, and more broadly, what do you see as next steps in light of what you have heard today?
Thank you very much, Annabelle. I won't take too much time. Just listening to all of us, we're all actors in this. WHO, WCO, OECD, UNIDO, WIPO. And what I was trying to picture in my mind, and WHO has been very active in terms of tracking and regulating. I was asking myself whether the sum of the parts add up to a whole. That was really the question. Here you have all these organizations, as usual, doing very good work, but like you were saying, Maria, and even within the same organization, sometimes you don't get an overview. So the first plea is WHO has been on top of this matter. Awesome. I just wonder whether they could coordinate us, and bring us together with also UNODC and so on. We are all doing one thing or the other, but how does it all add up to concrete action? So that would be immediate plea that I would ask Maria Angela to take back and see if we can do this. I think the second thing that strikes me is that the poor people, we've all said it in every, almost everyone has said it, whether it's Gerd, who was very passionate, all of us. The poorer people suffer the most from this trade. But we need some kind of a bigger effort with awareness raising with national authorities. Because at the end of the day, this advocacy, this education, this letting people know, that this could be dangerous. It's really important. I can look it's in my own country. We had, as I said, a wonderful lady, Professor Akunyili, who was fighting this fiercely and during her time and putting her life in danger to do it. And still, you still have it's like a mafia going, working in this, both inside and outside. But if we can raise and educate the public so much better, I'm not sure that this thing is taken really as seriously in our countries, in developing countries, as it should be. I don't see national movements trying to work on this. So the second question I had with cooperation, we all have resources, is really, how can we, the capacity building WIPO does and so on, how can we use these efforts to educate our public leaders and officials who can then we can help give them the tools to raise awareness locally much more. I mean, a coordinated, systematic effort to do this, not a scatter approach. And lastly, with Cunyo, the customs issue and cross-border issues are very important. And you mentioned e-commerce. I too am really afraid that with digital trade, this thing will take off in directions that we can only fight it with better and smarter technology. I seem to recall already efforts in this direction. There was a smart young man in Ghana, for instance, who developed this scratch technology for drugs. And I remember meeting him because he became quite famous at the time, where, you put this label and for people who do not, you don't even need to be sophisticated. When you buy the thing, you look to see if it has that, scratch thing on it. And then if it does, it has numbers and you can try to telephone and put the numbers. If they are not there, then the product is not valid. If it doesn't have that label, it's not valid. So this was like a simple way. Of course, you need like a cell phone or something to be able to send a number, but at least it was the beginning And I don't know what happened to this guy and his technology. But I know it was being used. I don't hear about it. But young people can invent clever ways in which we can really try to tackle this, especially for those who are not as well educated. So how can we put our resources and thinking behind that? And finally, and then I'll keep quiet, the private sector. Surely them, on the intellectual property front, here's one area where they could really put their money where their mouth is. They must be interested in people pirating their products or mimicking it. We have to be careful of technology, of the language. As Mariangela said, substandard products. No, what was the other one? Substandard and falsified. They must be interested in falsified products. So in both, actually. Are we really working with them? I don't know what WHO must be bringing them in, but that was my last thought. So those are 4 specific issues where I think we could all really come together to save lives and bust illegal ways of make Kunyo's life easy.
All right, we have our work cut out for us. That's all we have time for today. More will come, of course. A big thank you to our principals and deputies and to everyone who tuned in. Please share this conversation with your colleagues, your friends, and followers on social media. A recording of the event will be available on the WTO website. So thank you again for your participation.